Our landscapes today. First thing we need to do is download the two photos. So if you've never downloaded from Google Classroom before, you know you need to click on the three dots in the upper right hand corner and hit open a new window. Once it opens in the new window, you should be able to hit download, and that should download to your downloads folder. I'm going to go back and grab the other one, open a new window, and download. There we go. Now we've got both of the files. We are going to now take this to our desktop, and I need to get those photos into my unedited photos folder. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder and call this Edwards Landscape. I'm going to get the images out of my downloads folder. There they are. First two DNGs right there. And I'm going to drag them into the Edwards Landscape folder on my desktop, and that keeps me nice and organized. Unedited photos, Edwards Landscape. There we go. All right, so the next step is to go into Lightroom, and we're going to import those photos now. Same as always, find them in your unedited photos folder. There's my Edwards Landscape. There's the two photos I'm importing. There we go. Import. Okay, so I can do some minor adjustments in Lightroom first. And those adjustments may be just, since I'm using this first image for the sky and the second image for the water and the rocks, what I'm going to do is make sure I actually like what's happening in the sky. And right now I'm losing separation between the rock on the right and the sky over here. I want to make sure I don't lose the yellows here and the nice whites and everything else. So I'm going to make some adjustments to my shadows. I'm going to try and bring out the shadows a little bit, salvage my highlights a little bit, raise my exposure a little bit. You can see that's where the rock is. That's what I'm trying to separate the sky from. So on exposure, I'm about 1.25 plus. And then for highlights, I'm pulling that all the way back to, oh, that's too far. I'm going to go to minus 75-ish. And then my shadows, we'll crank that up to about plus 75. All right, so that looks pretty good there. I'm getting the sky that I want. I'm going to switch over to this one. You can see this one's way overexposed. I've lost the sky here, but I'm getting what I want in the water. This has a shutter speed of 8 seconds, so we've got this nice, smooth, surfaced water here. So I'm going to lower my highlights so I can get some detail back into the water there. I'm going to raise my shadows a little bit here because I'm going to want to get some of the detail in the rocks there. And since this looks kind of cool, I'm going to pull the warmth on this over to about 60, 6,300-ish. If you don't have that number, I think if yours say 00, you might take it to plus 30, something like that. But it should look similar to this down below. All right, we might add a little bit of dehaze on this to get some blue into the sky and some definition back into the water. So I took that to about 65, and I think we're feeling pretty good. Pull my shadows up even more here. I need some detail. Plus 70, let's go. All right, that's looking pretty good for this one. So we're now, I just want to check and make sure that these two look like they're going to be combined well together. And they seem to look good. Okay, so I need to select both of them at the same time. So I'm going to hold down my Shift key and click on this other one. So they should be, this one should be a bright white, that one should be a light gray. Neither one of them should be that middle gray that's unselected. Once they're both selected, I can right click, go to Edit In, and instead of Edit in Photoshop, we're going to go all the way down here to Open as Layers in Photoshop. And that's going to combine these two images into a single image. Again, the reason I took two images is I wanted to make sure I had detail in the bottom half, but didn't lose my top half of my photo, which in order to get details in the bottom half, I definitely lost the sky in that top half. So that's why I shot two photographs. So Photoshop's going to keep working here. It should end up with two layers. Should, if it's doing this correctly. Come on, Photoshop. Does not seem to be opening them both. So let me try that again. I'm going to exit out of here. Should be getting them both. So if I right click, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. This time I right clicked on the left one with the right one also selected, so maybe I'll get it this time. There we go. That's what I wanted. So you should see the two show up as separate layers here. There it goes. All right. So what we want is this, the top image to be the darkened sky. That's the top image. And then we want the lighter image to be the bottom one. So if you need to, you may need to drag them around to change the order. And you can see as I'm dragging these, you can see the blue lines showing where it's going to end up. So make sure the darker image is on top. The next step is to select the sky. So I'm going to begin with the object selection tool right here. So if you can't see it, it's beneath the lasso tool or the polygonal lasso tool. It should be right here. You may see the quick selection tool. So if you click and hold, you'll get the object selection tool right there. And as I look here, you can see it's trying to select the sky, but it accidentally includes part of the water here. So we're going to need to refine this. So I'm going to go to select and mask now. So in select and mask, you should have this red uh, sort of masking color over the bottom. If you don't, you may need to come to view and make sure you have overlay selected. The next thing I want to do with this red overlay is make it slightly more transparent. So I'm going to come down to about 40 so I can see where it's actually showing up. And then we're going to zoom in to see where it messed up my selection. All right, so mainly it messed up the selection on the horizon line. So we can see there that's where it messed it up. And since that's a straight line, I'm going to use the polygonal lasso tool to deselect that steps. So come up here to the lasso tool, select the polygonal lasso tool, and if I simply click once and let go, it's going to start following me around. Okay, so be aware that it's going to follow you around until you're done selecting. So I'm going to come all the way across the horizon line here to inside the red where it's already deselected. And actually, I messed this up. Watch what happens. If I bring this back to the beginning here, it'll stop following me around, but I accidentally added it to the selection, so that's not what I wanted. So I'm going to hit Command Z, undo. I need to subtract from the selection, not add to. So I'm going to click on this icon here. Try this again, click outside, come across. I'm using the space bar to get the hand tool up there. All right, there we go. So it doesn't matter where I click in the red because it's already deselected. I just need to make sure I include all of the area there that I'm trying to get rid of. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I've got the water back. I need to fix an area out here and then a little bit of by the rocks here. I can see it kind of messed up. So I'm going to take the polygonal lasso tool again, and I'm going to try and get the sky back in there. So I'm going to add, since I'm adding the sky to it, I'm going to come across using the space bar again. And this time I'm going to go ahead and come into the rocks a little bit. I don't want to come in a ton. Cut across the top here. Okay. And then I'm going to come all the way across here. Just to there. I don't want to cut into those rocks at all. So I'm going to come back around and I'm just clicking to include bits of this until I get back to the beginning. Okay, so that removed all of the sky. You can see what it removed there. And the last little piece that I need to remove is right here. And I'm going to use the paintbrush for that. And again, right now I'm adding because I want to add the sky back in here. So I'm going to paint while I'm adding. And that's going to get a little bit hard for me to paint. So I could either draw it with the lasso tool, or I'm going to try this refine edge brush tool. And I'm just going to come along here and see if it can grab that for me. It looked like it did a pretty good job with the refine edge brush tool. So, looking good. I'm happy with my selection. Now I'm ready to exit out of here. So I'm going to click OK. You can see what's selected here. And now I'm going to come over here to the layers palette where it says layer masks. Right there, click on layer mask and notice what it creates. It has created this white and black little layer here. And the white area is what's showing and the black area is what's hidden. So if I look back at my photo, yes, the sky is what's showing and the ground is what's hidden because now this is the photo underneath. So there's those two photographs. I'm pretty happy with what that looks like. I can look at some of the hard edges that I created in here. That looks a little funky. So I'm going to come into my layer mask here. So I've clicked on the little black and white thing. I'm going to grab my brush tool. I'm going to choose a brush size by using the left square bracket to shrink or right square bracket to grow. In order to make a nice soft painting, I'm going to make sure that's at hardness 0. I'm going to make sure my opacity is at 100, flows at 100, all that looks good. Now I'm ready to paint in here. with my black, and it's going to soften that little edge of where the two images are blending together. I wanted to get rid of the parts of that didn't look quite right. I can switch from black to white, so if I switch to white, I can actually make that darker outline show up there. Let's see what that looks like. And see, they don't quite line up perfectly, which is why I'm kind of having to blend these two images in here. Okay. I'm pretty happy with that, although this edge where the water's hitting is not good, so I'm going to switch back to black so I can hide that water edge. That's going to have to do it. Okay, good enough. All right, so my focal point is this distant rock here. I'm going to try and draw the viewer's attention to that by making some adjustments. Now that I have these two images roughly combined the way I want them to, I need to combine them into a single editable layer. That's going to be Command Option Shift E. Command Option Shift E creates a new layer from the two bottom layers. So if I hide those two, you can see that's its own layer. That's a combined version of these two. But I don't delete those two just in case I want to come back to them. So now that I've got that ready, I'm going to now open up the Camera Raw filter. And with the Camera Raw filter, I can start making some definite color adjustments. So let's go to the color mixer, and we're going to look at hue, saturation, and luminance. And on the luminance, I'm going to crank up the greens because I want them to pop in this photo. I'm going to crank up the yellows just a little bit to make them a little bit brighter. I'm going to darken some of the reds. I'm going to brighten some of the blues. The purples I'm going to darken just a little bit. The magentas I'm going to brighten. So if you wanted to just match my numbers, you can pause the video here. Those are my numbers for luminance. Now I'm going to switch to saturation. And I want to saturate certain colors. So the greens, again, we're trying to make those pop. So I'm going to pull the greens up and saturate those some more. Pull the yellows up and saturate those a bit more, because the greens actually contain some yellow. I'm going to take my oranges and saturate those just a hair. Take my reds and saturate those just a hair. I'm going to take my aquas, blues, and the rest of that actually looks pretty good. So there's my color mixer. I can take hue and start to play with those numbers as well. My reds, I can try to push towards magenta a little bit more. My oranges, I can try to push towards red a little bit. My yellows, if I push them too much towards orange, then I lose the yellow, so I'm going to kind of leave them in the middle. My greens, I'm going to brighten those a little bit by pushing them towards yellow. My blues, I want to be a little bit brighter, so I'm going to push those towards cyan. My purples, I'm happy with those. My magentas, let's see where we're at with those. That isn't really affecting the color much. Okay, so I'm done with the color mixer. Sorry, I'll zoom in on that so you can see that really quick. There's the numbers for hue, There's the numbers for saturation. There's the numbers for luminance. All right, the next thing that I want to do is I want to sharpen this photo. So I'm going to zoom in on something. And you can see it's a little bit blurry. I'm going to see if I can add a little bit of detail here by sharpening the photo a little bit more. So I'm going to crank the sharpness up to about 50. We'll take a look at that. We don't want to go too far because then it starts to look kind of unrealistic. So I'm definitely going to keep this down around 50. So that's starting to look pretty good. And the last thing I want to do, I know I dehazed in Lightroom, but I'm going to add some of that haze back in so that it makes it look a little more magical or misty here. So I'm going to pull the haze to the right a little bit until I can start to see some of that little mistiness right along these rocks. Okay, notice it started to brighten some of those colors that I wanted to bring in there. I may have to come up into my light and try to darken my highlights or add some contrast here. So that's bringing some contrast back in. I can look at my effects and try to add some local contrast in there by putting clarity up or texture. Part of what I like about the photo is the texture. And that should get us a lot closer to what we want. All right. See if I can darken the sky a little bit again through the highlights. That looks pretty good. There we go. All right, looking good. So I'm going to click OK. And that brings us back here. Now, I'm going to add a curves adjustment layer because I want to darken some of the shadows. Okay, I'm going to bring in some darkness around there. I'm going to pull in some brightness up here. And right now, that's a little too dramatic for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the layer mask, and I'm only going to apply this in certain spots. So in order to do that, white is showing everything. I'm going to fill that area with black. So edit fill, black. And all of a sudden it removes everything, right? Now I can start to paint on this layer using white, right? Here's the layer mask. It's currently black, hiding everything. I'm going to paint on this layer using white to start to show what I want. So I want a nice big soft brush. I'm at about 2000 pixels with a hardness of 0. So if I start to paint over here, you'll notice it's going to add that darkness to the corners, which is what I'm wanting. Too much detail in there is drawing my attention to the corners. I don't want my attention in the corners. I want my attention to be drawn towards the horizon line here where this is. I can see that poor masking, so I'm going to shrink my brush size again here. Darken it in on my poor masking. That's a little bit better. Okay. And then I liked being able to see the color of light on the water in this area. So I'm going to paint that. That's a little bit too far. Let me undo that. I'm going to change my opacity of my brush to about 50 so it takes it in a slower direction. That's better. A little bit of color in here. That really starts to draw my attention to the rock in the background. All right, we're going to go ahead and stop there. So let's save the layered version of that file. You can see it saving right there. And then in order to turn this file in, We're going to need to go to File, Save a Copy. And here I can change the file type to JPEG, give it a name, and then choose my location and save. We're done.